Good day, good evening, and welcome to our event as part of the Books at the Institute program hosted by the Ukrainian Institute of America in New York. I hope you are well and safe wherever you find yourselves. My name is Andrew Horodisky. I am a board member with the UIA and advisor to its arts and literary programming. Books at the Institute is an initiative born of our broader cultural programming at the Ukrainian Institute, introducing audiences to and enabling them to engage with writers presenting innovative, creative, and academic thought and published works on relevant topics addressing Ukraine and Ukrainian literary culture, art and society, journalism, and historical and philosophical thought. It's an honor to introduce today's featured guest writer, Kyiv-based Oleksandr Mykhed, to discuss his book, The Language of War, released in English translation by Alan Lane in June of this year, an imprint of Penguin Books. Mr. Mykhed is joined in conversation with Kate Tsurkan from Chernivtsi. It's a pleasure to greet you both. Today's program is being recorded and will be available for later viewing once posted to our YouTube channel. During and after the discussion, I encourage you to post comments and questions for our guest in the Q&A section. There as well, you will see a link for ordering The Language of War online, and I hope you do so. Wartime witness, experience, communication, and trauma are difficult subjects to tackle in literature, journalism, and reportage. Some writers don't discuss it because they never experienced war personally. Others might dismiss wartime writing as something that merely heals the writer's wounds. Still others find it problematic to depict those who experience or serve in war as a special class of victim. But if we don't explore wartime experience in literature, we will never understand war's impact in deeply personal or societal terms. Never understand the incredible variety of responses to trauma, with all its emotional, philosophical, linguistic, and communicative nuances and exceptions. Writer and scholar Oleksandr Mykhed explains how war in Ukraine transformed his own life and thinking and those of his friends and family. From the publisher's introduction, I quote, "In the language of war, he writes of his own experiences when his quiet suburban life outside of Kyiv was destroyed overnight as Russian forces invaded in February 2022. And he brings together a host of other voices to talk about their experiences, including a veteran, an artist, a journalist, a literature professor, a soldier, and many more. It is a story of what happens when you wake up to the sound of helicopters and the smell of gunpowder, when your house is hit by shells, and when you spend your nights in a basement-turned bomb shelter. It is also a story about the realization that you must fight back even though you have never held a gun before. Ultimately, it's about things one can never forget or forgive. Haunting and timeless, it asks how it is possible to find the words to describe a new reality, how you can make sense of the world when the only language you can speak is the language of war. Oleksandr Mykhed is a Kyiv-based writer and literary scholar. He is now also enlisted in the armed forces of Ukraine. He is the author of 9 books. Selected essays and excerpts from his books have been translated into 10 languages. He has participated in literary residencies in Finland, Latvia, Iceland, the US, and France, and virtual residency at Oxford University. He has written for publications including Financial Times, Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, The Guardian, and has appeared as a guest on CNN and NPR. Oleksandr is a member of PEN Ukraine. Today's moderator, Kate Tsurkan, is a writer, editor, and prolific translator. Her work has appeared in The New Yorker, Vanity Fair, Harper's, the Los Angeles Review of Books, The Washington Post, The Guardian, Cave Independent, and elsewhere. She is the founding editor of the literary journal Apophany. Kate lives with her husband and beautiful young daughter in Chernivtsi. Please welcome Oleksandr Mykhed and Kate Tsurkan. Kate, if you will.
Thank you, Andrei, for that wonderful introduction. And it's so nice to see so many familiar names in the audience. I'm looking forward to hearing questions from you later, and of course, looking forward to talk to Oleksandr. I wanted to start, Oleksandr, with one quote from the book that just sticks with me forever. Where you write, "I want to forget it all. I want to never forget it." I was wondering if we could start by talking about how you prepared this material from the very start of the full-scale war, which was, just this incredibly difficult time for all, and yet there was this great necessity to begin collecting these testimonies and to begin recording your own thoughts. Could we start on that?
Good evening. Thanks for the invitation. That's a huge honor to join for this amazing talk. And thanks to Andriy and to Ukrainian Institute of America. And thanks a lot to Kate. And thanks for everybody in this amazing Zoom room. I think this question is a huge spoiler because this is the last sentence. Like we start to talk with the last sentence of the book, with the most important one, actually the final dot in this. The book started. It's not like preparing the material. This is the material that happens to you. This is the history that just occurs to you, and you understand that something really important is unfolding just in front of you. And so I consider this as just as we had this talk with Salman Rushdie and during the Lviv Book Forum, and we've discussed. I've been the host of his talk about his recent memoir called "The Knife," or just "Knife." Yeah. And he said that this is a nonfiction that just happened to him. And I think this is a formula that is similar to the language of war. This is just a nonfiction that happened to me. And just from the beginning, from the morning of 24th of February, I realized that this is something that I should fix into my memory. And this is something that I think the value of this nonfiction, the value of this memories that are conservated in this chronicles of war, it with time it's getting more and more valuable, as this is the mechanism for, I guess, for Ukrainians and for the world audience as well, because we should cope in a way with the horrors on the daily basis that's happening to us. So for sure we are not trying, we are just forgetting or just going in blackouts of the memory like this, because something tragical gonna happen next morning, and your memory should deal in a way. So I think this is 13 months of pain and 13 months of chronicle of war crimes, and that's why this is something that a reader should follow from time to time, not to forget what has happened to us.
But at the same time, I think it's really interesting to consider how language is impacted by war, sometimes even constrained. I know I have some colleagues at the Kyiv Independent, for example, who are incredible journalists, but they don't want to write. They're serving in the military and they just cannot bring themselves to write at the moment. At the same time, we see some incredible poetry especially from writers who are serving in the military, like Artur Dron or Yarina Chornohus. Both are in English translation already, I believe, so I recommend our listeners to check out their work if they haven't already. So can we talk about how, like, as you say, these testimonies and nonfiction have become kind of this source of strength and necessity, but at the same time, fiction in Ukraine has taken, well, writing fiction has taken a sort of a backseat, while poetry has come to step forward. Could we talk about that a little bit?
Do you mean talking about the what's happening in Ukrainian literature, or
No, about how language is constrained in some ways, and how it's changed, and how we rethink our approach to writing and expressing language during war.
no? I think the mirror, like, I try to elaborate the instrument, how to talk about it, and I figure out that the easiest and the only, for myself, the only possible way is to make it as direct as it possible and honest as it's possible, as it's like an open wound, writing as a wound. And for sure that this is something that is immediate in terms of poetry, and you have the emotion on you, you have the impression, and you have a quick text out of it. But it doesn't work like that when you are working on nonfiction, because it's not like writing, it's working, and it's hard work in terms of making it. So the first of all, it's something really simple. Secondly, it's something about the how the most ordinary words are getting the clear function and clear understanding what it is, what your home means, what your parents, dad, mom, wife, friend, rage, love, hate, it's something, revenge, blood, it's something really clear and understandable. And these are the terms. And for sure, it opens, in a way, it opens these process of synchronization with the previous generations. And I mean, in terms of the literary understanding, previous generations of Ukrainian writers, or those writers or journalists or poets who've experienced in a way what we are going now through the full-scale invasion, and through their testimonies. And it's really interesting because it totally changes your understanding what the valuable art is, what the valuable to, like, just a step back from the talking about the language. For example, the first time I've appeared abroad, and during the since the full-scale invasion, it was the Frankfurt Book Fair, and I've visited the local art museum, and as it was something from the life before the invasion, and I tried to test myself what works best. And the hilarious one was that Francis Bacon paintings works well. And this is hilarious because as the curator and the scholar who's experienced in the visual culture, I understand how Francis Bacon valuable is by my head and through like something through the knowledge, but it never grabbed me as something emotional. But since the full-scale invasion, like, I understand Bacon with my guts and through the understanding. That's what's happening. It's not only about the way we talk, it's about the way we are perceiving the language, or the visual culture, or the signs of culture. Yeah, but if we will talk about how it changed in terms on the daily basis, so it's like totally different lecture, how we talk in a really, again, in a direct way. And as uh, how it's in English nakaz, when like command, like your command from the for example, you're a soldier and the officer giving you command. So
And orders, yeah.
yeah, order, yeah, gives you an order, and you should not have any doubts in that order, like it's clear. And the same stuff happening in terms of language on the daily basis and how it works. And to finish this chapter, it's something that strikes me a lot, is how the language of the World War II is getting back into daily basis with the occupation, partisan, deoccupation, Gauleiter, and all these collaborator, and how it works as the language totally mirrors my understanding of the invasion as totally the situation of the World War II, when we have the Nazi regime that's trying to make a total genocide on the Ukrainian territory, and the language totally echoes is this in the most brightest way.
And kind of conversely to that, we see in other countries who are not experiencing war as the way we do in Ukraine, that these terms, people seem to not fully grasp them yet. Like during the election, I mean, in the US, it's a different topic, but quite interesting to see, like in retrospective, when Kamala Harris was calling Donald Trump a fascist, and people were saying that was a bad idea. Like he clearly has some terrible ideas, but you know, people in America, unfortunately, do not grasp the gravity of this word. Yeah, it's quite heavy thought to consider how this language is circling back.
Yeah,
But
the one things like I think it was, yeah, I think it's like 7 days or something that the Dutch publication, the Dutch translation of the Language of War appeared, and there is the first review and in the Dutch media. And one of the things that, like a special paragraph about the clear understanding, for example, of the term, why it's not Putin's war. And this is something, the thing that usually is used in non-Ukrainian media, and is usually considered as the war of one person and of one dictator. But in the book, I struggle in showing that this is not only Putin's war, and this is the war of the whole Russian nation. And yeah, so that thing that especially was interesting for the Dutch journalist or Dutch researcher, reviewer, and this is the thing that just you try to show the vocabulary that is used in Ukrainian discourse in talking about these things.
could we continue with this theme, but something slightly more colorful? As a foreigner watching Ukrainian media, social media, all of this, one of the most interesting things for me is how new words are emerging during wartime, like chlopok or bavov. No, these are words that exist, but they take on a new resonance during wartime. Or something more vulgar like bledina, or with volunteer Serhiy Sternenko, who has this campaign Russoris. I was wondering if you could talk about these new words for some people in our audience who might not know about them, and how interesting this is, this new vocabulary of wartime that's in a way kind of energizing sometimes for some people.
Yeah, I think this is again the co-opting mechanism as the reality cracked, and in a way the language became really harsh, and sometimes in the beginning, for sure, this was with the Russian warship, and these borders of what is acceptable in the public discourse really blurred, because you have to use a strong word to express strong emotions that you've probably never experienced before. So this is something about the canalization of your anger or your rage or despair or something like that. On the other hand, for sure, but it's like again, it's totally huge lecture. As for example, there is one element of this language is for sure its new realities, as all these Bayraktars and HIMARS and everything that's been supplied by the alliances. And this is one thing, and this is really interesting how it works. And with that, for sure, all these, for example, Shaheds, as they are called, flying balalaikas in the beginning, and then these how you call it, the small motorcycle, moped. Yeah, so all these mopeds, as it's an acceptable way of saying the Shaheds. On the other hand, for sure, it's something with the blurring the military slang with the on the daily basis, because the armed forces of Ukraine consists of more than 1 million of people, all kind of professional backgrounds, all kind of age, and a huge amount of women who are servicing in the armed forces. And it's everything mixtures for sure in the society, but on the other hand, you have like hundreds, thousands of volunteers with the family members. So all these kind of slangs are mixture in between each other. And for sure, the famous plus 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 is going as something like affirmative. When you've got the message and you need to say that you got it, you just use this plus plus plus. And other things as well. As for sure, there are so many jokes, as I'm a serviceman and I'm subscribed to all kind of Instagram channels, accounts that are joking about it. And for sure, there are these hilarious things as the avatars, the guys who are using too much alcohol and they're becoming blue. That's why they're called the avatars, and all kind of the things. And I think this new vocabulary is in a way really hilarious, and this is something in terms of the national character, was the Ukrainian famous dark, tricky humor and how it works. And this is again the way of coping with the tragedy and the way of coping with something horrifying around you, because you just the only way is to fight and to make laugh out of it. And this was really noticeable mm, during the first stage of invasion, probably the first, I don't know, 6 months or something, with this national mythology, with the farmers who took over the Russian tanks, and sometimes with the IPSO founded stories about the old lady who broke the Russian drone with her jar full of pickles or something like that, marinated pickles. And these are parts of the mythology that flourished, and partly it was Ukrainian IPSO, and partly it was the national folklore for that. And I don't know how IPSO is in English. Like
Psychological.
PSYOPs, yeah, like PSYOPs. It was a part of, for sure, of Ukrainian PSYOPs, but on the other hand, it's folklore.
Mhm. I know that you also recorded the audiobook in Ukrainian for the language of war. And I mean, I have never as I understand from this experience, it takes a lot of repetition, a lot of time spent. Intonation is very important. So emotionally, it puts you in a very similar headspace, I would assume, to when you were writing the book. Could you talk about this experience of revisiting it when you were recording?
Yeah, it was really emotional and in a way traumatizing, and but still I'm convinced that this was the best option, as this is the another dimension of the existence of this text, as this is flesh and this is something really raw, and this is my story and it should be told by myself. And the book is around 9 hours, something like, I guess, 540 or something, the whole audiobook, and it took us 14 hours, and it was something sessions for 90 minutes. There were chapters when I was screaming, there were chapters where I was crying, and for sure that's one of the reasons why I don't like to read chapters from the book aloud, and this is something that I consider this as a solid piece, and I consider this as like I grab a reader by hand and I took through this journey, and it should go step by step in this void. And if you just take page 159 out of nowhere, you are not ready for that, for facing it. And facing with the whole book, I had just in this small space of the studio, and I had one thought, that this is pretty tough reading, and I don't invite to those who will read it and those who will in a way experience this book through this. So yeah, and I've never listened to the audio version after that. But in a way, there is another dimension of the existence of this text, as uh, I read this book in different languages for proofreading it with the translations, and this is again something really interesting to see it as the again it in a way I know the story, I know the style, and I know the main plot and all the characters, and but still it's really tough to meet the text even in other languages. It's something really estranged, and it doesn't belong to myself, and now to read it is just a reader for that.
Mhm. I wanted to talk also about uh, the language of war that we use for children. Something for me as the new mother, it just absolutely breaks my soul to understand that we are having to figure out how to explain to an entire generation of young people what war is, what explosions are, how to stay safe, things like this. And these stories about, for example, the young boy who made the sort of makeshift bomb shelter for the ants, so that ants would also be safe during the air raid siren. It's quite, on the one hand, shows this beautiful empathy, but also really makes you just so sad that they have to think about such things. And in Ukrainian children's literature, we have now books, explaining to children how to process the emotions of a parent who was killed on the front line. We also have more general books about war. You yourself also are a children's book author and wrote a book about war. Could we just reflect on this? How in the entire generation of young people, as they are shaping their language, how they view the world and themselves in it, are learning to incorporate this?
Yeah, no, this is one of the most one of the most important chapters in the book, Blue Van, White Van, Anya and the Children of War. And this is one of the most painful parts that I've worked. It's around 6 months for writing this, as it contains a lot of discussions with parents about the experience of their kids. And I ask, how has the full-scale Russian invasion affected your children? And I have like a small museum of these answers, and I was especially interested in the games that are played by children. And I don't know how to talk to them, because I think in a way it's supposed to be really direct, again, a really direct explanation that there is a crazy invader, and that's what they want to do, and we have to do what we have to do to protect ourselves. And I've did in May 2022, I made a fable, or I usually call it a non-fiction fairy tale, about the occupation of Kiev region. And I tried to make it on the way, how to make it again as something archetype. And that was my understanding of the fairy tale, how you could take the actual event and how you could make it timeless. And in a way, this is the thing that I'm trying to make in my nonfiction, as well as how to make these stories not only some kind of um journalistic piece of news that leaves just several hours, but how to make it a timeless story. And that would be my answer. So it's something about the archetype, the parable level, how to make a parable, but with no direct conclusion. And on the other hand, just being really truthful. And in that time, in May of 2022, it was really hard to write the last paragraph, because the last paragraph of the fairy tale is about the Перемога, about the victory day, or the reality when there is no full-scale invasion. And that was something that was needful for myself. And I think this is again the probably one of the rare examples when I had a clear understanding for my reader, because it's supposed to be myself to give some kind of hope. And if I would have these goosebumps writing it, so for sure, I hope a kid would get the same feeling out of it.
How do you think, how do you see that war has shaped and will continue to shape Ukrainian literature in the coming years?
I have the only one answer. Like I could not pray, but still I pray for surviving as many Ukrainians as it's possible, and as many Ukrainian writers as it's possible. And this is the only one thing that I'm thinking about. What gonna happen to Ukrainian literature? What gonna happen to literary process, genre? Like, we will figure out with that, but we just need to stop losing people. As I was really it struck me a lot the message from Oleksandr, the famous Ukrainian film director, in his interview, when he said that out of the whole team that worked on Dovbush blockbuster, the really big and interesting, adventurous blockbuster for Ukrainian cinemas that was premiered, I guess, last year in Ukraine. And he said that out of the whole team, 7 members of the crew are killed as soldiers, 5 are missed in action, and 70 out of them are in the armed forces serving right now. And this is the exact example of what's happening to Ukrainian art scene, because the same happening in literature, the same happening in visual arts, and it's the same happening in pharmacy, in I don't know, you name it, in any kind of sport. It's happening in taxi driving, it happening in ceramics, whatsoever. You take it, and we are losing people in each sphere. So that this is just, we need people, and that's it.
I think it's worth mentioning here the Pan Ukraine has this ongoing project, People of Culture Killed by War. And it's just, I think, unbelievable how the list just continues to grow. And you understand how many, it's not just writers, it's people of all spheres of culture. And you understand from these stories from their friends, their coworkers, loved ones, just how much they brought to the world. And it's really, but as you said, it's not just culture, it's all people that we need to make sure, you know, that we.
The last update for the Olena Gerasimyuk and Yevhen Lir project about the killed writers, it was something like 135 writers. So this is only that's what happened to literature. And then you have those who are missed in action as well.
I'm looking at the time, and I'm wondering, do we want to open up to questions?
Yeah, well, I think we have 2 of them. Can
Mhm.
you read this for us, please?
Sure, by all means. We have a comment and question from Lesya, who thanks you very much for your book and writing, and she's very pleased that it translates into other languages and that other peoples are reading it. Although she has non-Ukrainian American acquaintances who find it extremely complicated emotionally, and the writer, the original, the poster, Lesya, indicates that Ukrainians are living through this on a daily and nightly basis, and that it's, you know, some for some reason she finds it difficult to understand why someone here finds it very complicated. So the question from her is whether or not you plan on producing a English language audiobook.
Thanks a lot for this comment, Lisa. There is the audio book already. It was published, I guess, end of June, so 3 or 4 weeks after the publication. The audiobook is available on Amazon, and it was made by amazing Ukrainian British actor called Greg Kalpakchi. And we worked on the special Ukrainian pronunciation and spelling of all the terms, names of cities, people, etc. So it would have the Ukrainian vibes. And Greg did a great job, and I'm really proud of it. And please check. It should work well for that.
Sirhi has a question and comment and question. Thank you for being here. How does language represent the move towards democracy and Western values? Have you looked into the discourse of civil society and democracy and its changes during wartime?
Yeah, I think this is really interesting question. I think it's really complicated for my non-scholar mind right now and more oriented to orders, etc. But in a way, I think I would say not the language. I would say I would like to talk about the processes, as this decommunization and derussification to my mind is really important. And each day, yeah, I'm standing on the bus stop, and there is the trolley bus, and on the trolley bus you have these tableau, or the informational line, and the running line, and there is all these years there was the Lva Tolstoga square, and now it's Площа Українських Героїв, so it's the square of Ukrainian heroes. And it makes me proud. It doesn't insult me, as I see this each day. I'm supposed to see as well as this is one of my favorite subway stations in Kiev as well, and I really enjoy that now it's a proper name. So I would say that this is something really important, as Russians really understand this, because each time when they appear on the occupied territory, they try to bring the communized discourse. And one of the greatest examples is the battle for Bakhmut, as it was for Ukrainians, and it was the battle for Artyomovsk for Russians. And this is the Soviet name communization, and how this moving toward the Ukrainian future, how it works for that. And yeah, you have this swinging away Ухилянты and recruiting brigades, but my favorite one about the recruiting, the one is Busifikatia. This is a really interesting term of how saying that a person was asked to move to recruiting center, and with the official bus. And I think this term, the busificatia, is busification. I don't know. This is a really funny term that is used, and yeah, and this is again the mirror of the Ukrainian mood for this.
Next, we have a anonymous attendee that I'd like to read this out loud because it's addressed to you and it's very nicely written. Hello, thanks for hosting this. No questions, just a comment, really. Just about a year ago, I wandered into the Ukrainian Institute, and the Artist Memorial Photo Exhibit impacted me deeply, leading me to watch 20 Days in Mariupol, the film, and then find the Ukraine, the latest podcast to keep up with news of the war. I first heard Mr. Oleksandr Mykhed speak on the podcast a few months ago, and again I found this interview incredibly compelling, particularly when talked of writing to hold readers' hands and walk them through these horrors. Since then, I have included Mr. Mykhed and his family in my daily prayers. It is a privilege to hear him speak with the UIA today, and just wanted to say thank you for making space to share his and many others' stories. Slava Ukraini. Just on a note, for those who don't know, the Artist Memorial Photo Exhibit in our building is a collection of photographs and accompanying texts about various fallen cultural figures in Ukraine, whether they be artists, writers, poets, composers, dancers, the vast majority of whom are youth, very young people who have been snuffed out, but yet found a calling to defend their nation, their identity, their existence, their families, and history. So we have this ongoing memorial there, and we're very touched and grateful for people who comment on that and see it on a daily basis. So thank you very much. Another
you.
attendee writes, could you reflect on how the history of oppression in Ukraine of artists, writers, and thinkers influence your writing?
I'd like to express my huge gratitude to the previous comment. And I highly recommend this podcast, the Ukraine, the latest, that was founded by David Knowles, who passed recently, and that was a huge honor and really interesting experience to be with him in the studio and how to feel his empathy. And that was really important in terms of seeing a professional and seeing how the Western journalists still could have his high standard, but still being on our side. Um, Thanks a lot for this question about the influence on my writing. I think I've been working on the book called Alive, Understanding Ukrainian Literature, Живи. I've been working on it during the whole 2021, and this is a nonfiction book about 10 key figures to my mind in the understanding of Ukrainian classical literature. And this book showed me huge example of what Russia and Soviet system did or has been doing through centuries to Ukrainian artists, and it gave me a clear understanding what might happen if the full-scale invasion would happen, and what might happen if they conquer Ukraine. And that was one of the reasons why I understood that this is so important to be in the armed forces and try to protect the language, try to protect the culture, and try to protect the heritage of these brave ones. And this is on one hand. On the other hand, the understanding of how many Ukrainian poets, writers, artists have been tortured or mortified through this decades. For example, if we take Soviet era, it gave me a really interesting understanding that the Ukrainian literature, in its majority, is the literature that was created by young people, because not a lot of Ukrainian writers would live till their 40 year, till their 40s. And when we talk about Ukrainian classical writers, we are usually talking about the 2 or 3 books, 1 or 2 books, or something like that. And that's thing that's happening right now as well, because if we take, for example, Victoria Melina's heritage and her writings, and we will see 2 novels, the debut post-mortem debut poetry collection and post-mortem debut nonfiction, and 2 books for kids, and that's it. This is the key figure for understanding the Ukrainian writing before, because I highly recommend her Дім для дома, the house for dom. And this is an amazing novel, as well as her poetry written since the full-scale invasion is just astonishing. And this is the figure that is like, her absence is visible, touchable in understanding what the current Ukrainian literature is. So we are still there. We're still in the same situation of the Russian void and this oppression.
Ukrainian literature has historically come and gone in cycles, very often in history because of trauma, because of some sort of national experience, whether it was war or the changing of borders. So I understand that, you know, many, especially fiction writers, have forlorn that kind of writing now and are doing more journalistic and nonfiction writing. In terms of creativity, in all the arts, I believe that after the war, there will be another resurrection of strong resurrection of permanent culture, and you know, it'll be a big one. Um, I think that's basically what we have for public questions. I have a couple of personal comments. I very much appreciated Kate's mentioning how children are affected. You being a young mother, and how the current vernacular, the topical vernacular affects them, and whether or not there's a belief, I'll address this to the two of you, whether or not children will be growing up with that language for this coming generation, and you know, and how this current war will affect the vernacular and their use of language, and in both in regular discussion and in description. Do either one of you have comments on that?
Um, I believe that I had read recently somewhere that an astonishing number of young people, I mean children, in Ukraine, can be diagnosed with PTSD. It's going to be a huge issue to talk about what is going on. I can say even in more safer areas, because no place is completely safe in Ukraine. I have a friend in Uzhhorod. She has two small daughters. One is 4, and she told me that when the 4-year-old daughter hears the air raid siren, sometimes she asks, "Mom, is there going to be a missile attack? Are we going to die?" And she had to explain this to a 4-year-old. It's just absolutely unbelievable. It's so wrong that such things have to happen. But as Oleksandr said earlier, we have to be very direct with kids, because you can't really talk around it. They need to understand, because this is the critical level of the situation. I can say, I mean, my daughter is only 7 months old, so she doesn't say anything except mama. But I noticed when we have air raid siren, she becomes very silent and she becomes very focused, and she's a very talkative baby and very active, but she understands, even as a small child, that sound is a harbinger of danger, of something evil coming possibly. So it's something, watching her, when I see her hearing the air raid siren, I think, I hope that by the time she can talk and understand the world, that she will not, I will not have to, it will be something for the school books to understand. Hopefully I will not have to, explain to her in real time what an explosion is. But yeah, it's very hard. It's very hard to think about, and I'm kind of rambling, but yeah, it's just, that's the simple answer. It's very kind of depressing, overwhelming, and hard to think about. But these conversations will continue for a long time.
But that's also the reality, and that's also the psychological kind of fallout that children of all ages are going to have to contend with, both psychologically and in their use of language. Oleksandr, I also had a personal question, while reading your book, more semiological, I think. Throughout the book, you start off paragraphs with the phrase, "As I write this sentence," or "As I write this phrase," or "As I write this entry," comma, and then it's followed by some sort of traumatic occurrence in reality, almost like a news entry. And I wanted to know what I gathered from that was that it was kind of like a declarative mention of time that it's either concurrent or just happened and it's fresh in your mind. But as a reader, when I read it, it's something obviously that happens now in the past. And I don't know if it's a play on the psychology of the reader to kind of have a significance of this occurrence that happens, or is it just a reminder, or is it something that you tried to contend with yourself at the moment? Because there's a dichotomy of push and pull, of having a need to almost interrupt the flow of the narrative by interjecting that. So I just wanted to hear about your intentional kind of comments on that.
Yeah, that's an amazing question. I think the the purpose of that, I tried to show the horror of reality of how many things occur simultaneously. And the idea of this while I'm writing these sentence is trying to show that you're in a way reading the book is something that is used to be safe, like you feel in the safe space, and it seems that I am in safe space writing it, as I have the time and possibility to think, to articulate, to work on the form, elaborate, etc. But with these underlining of the similarities, simultaneity, I try to show how horrible it is. And for example, in the text, which is not in this book, but it was written later in Requiem for Victoria Melina, and there is the part that in the moment while I was writing the Requiem for Victoria, I've got the message from the my brothers in arms with whom we started in Chernivtsi in the beginning of the invasion, that his brother Egid, who was in the same territorial defense unit in Bakhmut, that he was killed in action. And this is the thing that strikes me a lot, that while I'm writing the Requiem, in this similar moment, I have this message, and his message is just as short as it's possible, with no emotions, as it is in the official language of how it works. And this is just word, and that's it. But that's his brother, and that's how. And I felt that this is so important to include this in the flow, and this is one of the examples while I'm doing this, because it's everything about the it's too much of everything that my mind could contain. That's too much.
Your and sobering. Thank you much. Kate, one last question for you. Bring it back to you. Can you talk a little bit about a project you're working on called for Kyiv Independent Explaining Ukraine?
Uh, it's a simple newsletter about culture. I can say that we have a lot of really great newsletters at Kyiv Independent. One is called The Witness. It's from our War Crimes Investigations unit. They also have several documentaries, so I recommend our listeners, if you haven't seen those yet. They cover topics like what is happening to Ukrainians in occupied territories, about women who were Ukrainian women who were raped by Russian soldiers, the kidnapping of Ukrainian children. And these colleagues of mine are able to track down some of the Russian soldiers or officials and even confront them in the phone calls. And this is quite chilling just to watch. I can't imagine what's like for them to actually do these investigations. So yes, I highly recommend reading this, even though it's not easy. There's also the newsletter called What the Fuck is Wrong with Russia? It's a very interesting newsletter about everything that's happening weekly basis in that country. And there's a business newsletter, and then there is mine. So basically, this concept explaining Ukraine, we have another section in Kyiv Independent that's kind of like informational articles about Holodomor, about the Chernobyl disaster, things like this. So the newsletter is more of a personalized take from me as a foreigner who has lived for 6 years in Ukraine, how I am learning more about Ukrainian culture and how I explain it to my readers. So recently, my latest one was about Oля Kobylanska, specifically her story Vals Melancholique, because as I say, the results of the US election where I'm from were really depressing, especially as a woman. And Ukraine has this great feminist writer tradition throughout the centuries. So here is one example. So yeah, it's a fun little side project of mine.
That's absolutely fabulous. I wish you much luck with that and continued success.
Thank you.
Oleksandr and Kate, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a very enlightening conversation, an important conversation. And I hope that our audience members have an opportunity the book is disappearing, to order and read The Language of War. It's an important contribution to the current canon. Again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And we wish you much safety, health. Our prayers are with everyone there, and we wish you further success. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you.
Mm.